Roswell testimony reveals name of reverse engineering program applied to alien spacecraft. And you notice here, it's a comp image of various things here. And you notice the metal rod on the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock position with Greek letters saying Eleftheria, which means freedom. Now, could this have been the name of the spacecraft? And why does it have Greek writing? Of course, Eleftheria is not written in proper Greek. Instead of using epsilon and ypsilon, they use epsilon phi. But it's still Greek lettering. Very strange. So, Roswell testimony reveals the name of reverse engineering program applied to alien spacecraft. Some technological leaps since 1947 have led ufologists to think that they were the consequence of what happened that year in Roswell, New Mexico. Now, an unpublished testimony accounts for a secret reverse engineering program designed to study the ship crashed in the Roswell incident. The UFO depended on a kind of telekinesis on the part of its alien crew. We recently reported on an exhibition that took place at the Fredericton Regional Museum, dedicated exclusively to a once prominent resident physicist and ufologist Stanton Terry Friedman, by far the most prestigious civilian investigator on the Roswell case. The famous paranormal blog Mystery Planet requested access to the exhibited material, largely composed of a large number of papers and letters that Stan kept in his personal archive. Among them they found a more than striking letter where a certain Sean, the surname is censored, from Texas, the son of a military witness to the incident, tells what his father knew and bequeathed to him as an alien ship crashed in 1947. And the transcript of the letter can be seen. This is it. Dear Mr. Friedman, January 26, 2010. A friend gave me your address and said you want to hear from family members of military men who witnessed anything related to flying saucers during their service. I have a first-hand eyewitness account given to me by my father regarding flying saucers and so-called aliens that I think you should hear. I also have relevant documentary evidence left to me by my father that I would like you to examine. In 1973, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I bought a comic book depicting the recent alien abduction of 2 men while they were fishing at night. The abduction story fascinated me. I showed the comic to my father and asked him if he believed it really happened and whether he thought flying saucers were real. To my surprise, my father told me that flying saucers were indeed real because he had seen one up close. I asked him when and where he had seen the saucer, and he told me the following story. My father told me that in the summer of 1947, he was at an air base in Fort Worth, Texas, for reserve training after temporarily discharging from active duty with the Army Air Corps earlier that year. He said he remembered it well because it happened on the 4th of July holiday weekend. One night he was playing cards when an officer came in and asked for volunteers to make a routine red-eye flight to New Mexico. My father said he jumped at the opportunity, glad to get flight time. He was an air crew, not pilot. My father loved to fly more than anything. He said he was especially happy because it was his birthday, July 6th. My father said it didn't take him long to figure out something was wrong because everything was tense and hurried, as if it was some sort of an emergency. He said he knew it was no routine flight when 2 MPS boarded his plane with fully loaded Thompson submachine guns. He said they flew together in a C-54 as part of a convoy, with a second C-54, a bomber, and 2 fighter escorts. He told me a general was with them aboard the bomber. My father said they were flying hot, that means they were armed, and it reminded him of fighter and bomber operations during the war. He said everything was definitely out of the ordinary. When he asked what was going on, an MP told him a rocket had crash-landed on U.S. soil. They landed at an airbase in New Mexico and took trucks and jeeps to a remote piece of land. There were MPs already present, and they tried to prevent the air crews from entering the property. My father said when the general told the MPs the airmen were his boys, they were allowed to pass. On the ground, my father said he saw the scattered remains of some sort of crashed aircraft. He said he had seen the remains of crashed fighters and bombers in the Pacific, but this was different from anything he had ever seen before. It didn't look like the other crashes. My father said he was the only one present who was familiar with the internals of jet aircraft, since he studied jet propulsion and trained as a mechanic on the Army's first jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. The general knew my father's familiarity with advanced jet aircraft, and he asked my father to take a look at the wreckage, see what he could make of it, and my father said the wreckage was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Nothing resembled the shape of a conventional airplane or a rocket. There were chunky pieces of relatively intact metal frame and many smaller, thinner pieces of what looked like a fuselage. Everything was made of a strange metal alloy that he called unobtainium, very light and strong. Some of the pieces could not be bent, while others were extremely flexible. There were also some pieces that appeared to be rusted on the outside or to have been subjected to very high heat. There were no discernible welds or rivets anywhere in the wreckage, and my father said it looked as if the entire ship had somehow been cast in one piece. There were no motors or moving parts at all, no propellers, jets, or nozzles. There were no visible cables, switches, gauges, vacuum tubes, or electronics of any kind. There were what looked like long, small lights, solid pieces of plastic of what he called spaghetti that were not wires or tubes, with no apparent function. There were strange characters on some of the pieces, a type of writing my father had never seen before, although only on the inside of the ship. There were no marks on the outside. Well, obviously the father probably didn't know the fact that this writing is in fact Greek lettering, meaning freedom, eleftheria. Now, there were also a bunch of loose objects with no apparent purpose. The strangest objects he said he found were metal reclining seats the size of a child, with notches for the head, body, arms, and legs, including notches for hands with spaces for 6 fingers. There were no corpses in the rubble. After examining the remains, my father reported to the general, "Kel, it's not one of ours, it's for sure." Asked whether he thought it was a rocket or a jet, he replied, "Neither." The general asked my father if he thought the Russians had done it, and my father replied, "No, unless those inscriptions inside are in Russian." We do know that the Cyrillic alphabet in Russian does look Greek. Okay, that's for those who don't know. It was Greeks from northern Greece that gave the religion and the alphabet to the Russians about 8th century AD. Now, the rumor around the place was that the ship was a crashed flying saucer, and everyone present instinctively felt that it was not from Earth. My father said that he helped the crew pick up some of the remains until more soldiers and some intelligence officers arrived and told them to leave. He said they returned to the local air base, and then the next day they flew the recovered wreckage back to Fort Worth in 2 C-54s again with combat escorts, but this time without the general's company. Three small bodies packed in ice were loaded aboard his plane. They told him that they were the crew of the crashed ship. The ice was melting, and according to my father, the bodies were decomposing and smelled bad. He was able to examine the bodies and obviously thought that they were not from this planet. This is what he told me about what he observed. 1, they were humanoid with a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, a mouth, a nose. 2, they had no ears or teeth. 3, they were small and fragile with unusually large heads. 4, they had large eyes but no lids. 5, they did not have genitalia. 6, they had 6 fingers on each hand. 7, they had skin that looked like that of a shark. 8, they were the perfect size and shape to fit the formed metal reclining chairs he had seen among the wreckage. Upon arrival in Fort Worth, the remains and bodies were immediately loaded onto another transport under heavy surveillance and flown elsewhere. My father said he thought it was all sent to Washington, D.C. Subsequently, a rumor was heard that a fourth body had been recovered separately later and shipped alone with the rest of what was recovered. My father said that he and the rest of the crew were immediately questioned by intelligence agents who ordered them never to talk about what they had seen, forcing them to sign a confidentiality agreement that would be enforced under penalty of treason. My father was a member of the 414 fighter group. He was very well connected with the AAF and the airline industry. His stepfather, Charles Eastman, was an officer in Kelly APB and helped him get started in the AAF with special privileges. My father's dream was to be a fighter pilot, but still too young, he entered first as a mechanic and crew chief. My father was very intelligent, had mechanical talent, and was very interested in airplanes, especially jets. He was part of the P-80 Shooting Star program, the Army's first operational jet fighter, and trained at the plants where they were designed and built, where he received low-level security clearances. He received special training in air bases and aircraft manufacturing throughout the country. He was discharged from active duty in early 1947, but continued to train and serve in reserve status until he returned to active duty when the Korean War began. When he was discharged in 1947, he was recommended to continue military training, in which he participated frequently at various air bases and aircraft plants, including plants and bases in Fort Worth. Shortly after leaving active duty, he began formal pilot training, attending the Schreiner Institute in Kerrville, Texas, where many World War II airmen and fighter pilots were trained. My father was very loyal and devoted himself to the Army Air Corps and later the United States Air Force. My father kept an address book with names, addresses, and phone numbers of all the airmen he met across the country and abroad, from World War II to Korea. He had regular contact with many of them throughout his life. He regularly attended veterans meetings, VFW, and spent a lot of time in VA hospitals. My father had many well-known engineers and aeronautical plants in which he trained and maintained his contacts with them. He had access to inside information of the government's saucer recovery program. Because he was there from the beginning, because he knew many of the other men who participated, he said that these men were forbidden to speak to strangers about these matters, but that they could and continued to speak freely among themselves about it. For years after recovery, my father continued to monitor and gather information on subsequent developments through his many contacts, some of whom became high-ranking officials and government agents. As one of the first at the scene of the saucer accident, others involved continually introduced him to new members of the team, even years later, and shared their experiences with each other. He explained to me that those involved formed a kind of fraternity around the recovery events that they had experienced. It was an unsettling and unnerving experience, and the only ones they were able to talk to about it were themselves. He made it clear to me that he was good friends with some men who were high up in the recovery program. Despite being ordered never to speak about his appearance, he continued to ask questions at every opportunity. The following is a synopsis of what my father told me that he was able to learn through his contacts over the years. The wreckage was taken to a hangar somewhere and carefully reassembled like a giant puzzle, revealing a saucer-shaped ship. Subsequent searches were conducted for all missing pieces. Some of the men involved in the recovery had their belongings looted in search of the missing pieces, some of which were recovered in this way. However, many pieces remained missing, and it was believed that they were still out there in someone's possession. My father pointed out that some of the crew took souvenir pieces, though he did not. The writing inside the ship was never deciphered. Well, obviously, I tell you, it says Eleftheria, meaning freedom. Now, I don't know what other writing was in there. Now, when electrical currents were applied to parts of the ship and the materials within it, they changed shape and exhibited strange properties. The ship's frame and fuselage were found to incorporate wiring and circuitry that were invisible to the naked eye, somehow arranged perfectly atom by atom within the metal. It was determined that the ship itself and all the material it contained had been cultivated, quote-unquote, in some way as singular pieces of the molecular level, crystal by crystal, one molecule at a time. The materials were perfectly arranged in geometric lattice patterns with molecular alignment, creating unusual alloys and amalgams with properties not found in natural material. Scientists were unable to reproduce the materials or determine how they were made. The creatures, quote unquote, as my father called them, that recovered at the accident site had circulatory systems but no digestive organs. It was determined that they somehow absorbed nutrients through their skin. The creatures had unusually large brains with 4 hemispheres separated by bony plates and an extraordinary large amount of sensory nerve tissue throughout their bodies, arranged in specific patterns. The creatures were connected to the ship through a form of wireless technology and were an integral part of the ship. The creatures in the ship functioned as a single unit. The creatures were not mere crew members or passengers of the ship per se, but were an operational part of the ship itself. They were much more than just pilots. The creatures were bioengineered robots made for a specific function, and they were simply one more component of the trade. They were grown in a laboratory using methods similar to those of the other material. Their flesh and bones exhibited molecular alignment like other materials, and they were unusually resilient. The creatures were determined not to be representative of the physical appearance and biological type of the beings who designed and built the ship. They were simply drones or machines, and the creators of this technology were believed to be considerably different physiologically. There was no propulsion unit inside the ship. The propulsion unit was initially believed to have been destroyed in the accident, but it was later determined that the propulsion was provided by the creatures themselves as an advanced form of telekinesis, as explained by my father. The creatures themselves, or their minds rather, were the units of propulsion and navigation. It was determined that the brains of the creatures served as onboard computers for the ship. The ship and its components were determined to function through a type of a non-physical energy that we do not yet have access to, an energy apparently harnessed and controlled by the minds of the creatures. The energy that fed, controlled, and powered the artifact was determined to be a form of focused consciousness or power of thought. It was determined that the cause of the accident was lightning that struck the ship. The lightning apparently incapacitated one of the creatures, somehow creating an imbalance in the force driving the ship, breaking it. The ship could not function properly without all the creatures acting in unison. The origin of the ship was never determined. It was believed to have originated from one of the 3 sources: A, another planet within the Milky Way or another galaxy in this universe; B, a planet or another dimension; or C, the Earth's own far future. It was determined that the ship could travel and maneuver faster than the speed of light, capable of virtually instantaneous dematerialization and rematerialization, moving from place to place in this way while defying known laws of physics, I guess interdimensional travel. This, I do have the playlist of the Emerald Tablets written by Thoth the Atlantean. I advise you to listen to it because it's unbelievable, the technology that the ancient Atlanteans had. They had interdimensional travel. They also had interstellar travel. Now, going back to this, it was determined that the ship could travel and maneuver faster than the speed of light, capable of virtually instantaneous dematerialization and rematerialization, moving from one place in this way while defying known laws of physics. It was determined that the spacecraft could travel many light years in an instant, somehow traveling in a bubble of space-time, or warping or bending the space-time around it and jumping through dimensions. It was determined that it possessed the ability to travel interdimensionally, and was believed that it could also travel back and forth through time. Attempts were made to reverse engineer all the technology discovered within the ships with limited success. Another identical ship had been recovered intact but never made functional. The ship would not function without the presence of the creatures, which were the crucial operational component of the machine. Unsuccessful efforts have been made to clone the creatures. Because he was persistent, my father received a lot of information from various sources regarding the flying disc recovery investigation. In our many conversations on these topics, my father emphasized to me that the secrets of the discs were feasible technologies that humans could and would one day master. Witnessing the crashed saucer and a profound impact on had a profound impact on my father for the rest of his life. Before the event, he was extremely interested in all types of aircraft, especially advanced propulsion systems, an interest that led to his early work on the first jets. Having seen what he saw, he gained a lifelong drive to understand how the crashed saucer worked and reproduced the technology. He became obsessed with the subject and dreamed of ways to reproduce its propulsion system. He stated that it was possible that the men he knew personally had already worked hard to achieve this goal. At some point, my father acquired a set of classified documents related to a project codenamed RAMP, R-A-M-P. He said they came from one of his contacts in California. These documents describe the propulsion system of the recovered discs and the efforts made to duplicate it. The documents contain the details of advanced form of telekinesis generated by the creatures as propulsion and how it was believed to work. My father said that the information in these documents is the key to reproducing the propulsion technology of the ship. When I was young, my father thought that jets were the way of the future, so he entered the P-80 Shooting Star program to study jet propulsion. However, he changed his mind when exposed to the incredibly advanced symbol technology. My father had held that saucer propulsion was the true way of the future. He emphasized the fact that whoever is able to develop and commercialize this technology will become the rich beyond belief, and he claimed that there were limitless applications for the technology in all segments of society. Many times since 1973, I have urged my father to tell someone what he knew and to make the information public. He refused, saying that he had taken an oath and signed a document and that he could be jailed or even killed if he revealed something. He made me swear that I would not tell anyone either, and said he'd deny everything if I said a word about it. However, before he died, my father gave me the RAMP project documents and told me that, quote, I would know what to do with them when the time came, end quote. Although the RAMP documents he left me appeared to be genuine, I never had any evidence to support my father's claims until after his death, when I found the records about his military service indicating that he did in fact participate in and associate with the AAF in various facilities from 1944 to 1952. For many years I've kept my father's secrets. He died unexpectedly a few years ago, and since then I have wondered what to do with the information he left me. I think now is the time to reveal what I know and ask for help. The right time that my father referred to. He clearly believed that I should try to develop the technology and commercialize it, but I lack the resource to do so. However, I have studied it intensively and made some progress in my understanding of the technologies involved and how they can be applied. I'm not looking for publicity or notoriety. What I want is someone to help me develop the technology my father left me. I'm willing to share the information in the RAMP documents with you if you work with me in secret and help me figure out what to do with the information. If you are not interested anyway, please refer this project to a trusted colleague with the necessary qualifications. Please reply. I hope to get news from you. And to be honest, Sean crossed out Gatesville, Texas. End of the letter. And so far, the translation and transcription of the letter, the original in English, can be downloaded on the PDF here. Unfortunately, we have not yet been able to come up with Stanton Friedman's answer, if there was one, but the truth is that such of what was said in the text is consistent with what is maintained by other important witnesses to the Roswell incident. The most interesting thing that is revealed here is that these creatures were not fully biological, but rather robots or artificial intelligences. A former Pentagon official claimed the same, that were an integral part of the crashed ship and its propulsion system. And the conclusion, given the boost recently received by UFO issue and the governmental and political level, could anything mentioned in this mysterious letter and the secret documents and program to which it alludes be confirmed soon? Complicated considering the implications, although in the near future, when human minds are integrated with artificial intelligence and machines, or when we send advanced humanoid robots to explore planets for us, we might as well wonder where the idea came from. And the source is Mystery Planet, and this is on Infinity Explorers by Ansh Shrivastava. Let's remember that the Argonauts and the ship Argo of the Argonauts, Jason and the Argonauts of the mythology of ancient Greece, tells us that the ship Argo was actually a spacecraft. It was a flying craft carrying various. The Argonauts were not just everyday poor people, sailors. They were actually kings and princes, one of them being Hercules, and the Argo was able to read their minds. And the ship Argo told the remainder of these kings and princes to take Hercules off the craft because Argo could not stand reading his thoughts. They were too hard and harsh for the intelligence of the craft to fathom. Okay, so this is my comment there. Please leave your comments about this, and thank you for your support. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.